But back to that astonishing decision by the Victorian government to give $15 million to sponsor Netball Australia. Now, that kind of political spending really shows exactly why Victoria has by far the biggest debt of any state. And it helps to explain why Victoria just can't keep control of spending, with Treasurer Tim Pattis today telling public servants, and Victoria sure has never had this many, forget the debt, he's going to find ways to pay them even bigger wage rises.
And I've said previously that I expect that our wages policy will have to increase. Exactly where and on what basis, I'll have to wait to see how the economic event settles in.
Helps to explain also why this government is so hopeless at controlling costs that its huge infrastructure projects tend to blow out. For instance, Premier Daniel Andrews' pet suburban rail loop project, promised just before the last election, has gone from an estimated $50 billion, already insane, to now 2.5 times that much, $125 billion. Can you believe it? Or a general warning, this is a dud that's going to lose half that cash. Joining me is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. On the very day that the Andrews government admits it's racked up nearly $2 billion more in debt, on top of all the rest, soon that debt's about to be more than New South Wales, Queensland and Tasmania combined, Premier Andrews still finds $15 million to sponsor Netball Australia. Why would he be using taxpayer money on this?
Well, it's an election, of course. That's the obvious answer, and it's the obvious reason why this is being done. And it's about, Victoria trying to fill the space of a minor, a West Australian minor. There's no doubt about that. So really, it's a feel-good factor from Daniel Andrews on a day when the budget really delivers pretty dire news to Victorians. And look, you talk about that debt, the debt which will rise by more than 60% over the next 4 years, a debt which really is now being funded to really, if you like, spend on the hospitals and on the nurses and on the public servants, really, to provide the wages and the increases. And yet also that is predicated on significant increases in employment going forward to provide the payroll tax, significant increases in stamp duty from property sales because they need that to actually keep the revenue coming through the door, and really only suggesting that in the next year that house prices in Victoria are only going to drop by 4%, when most market analysts suggest that prices are likely to drop by 15 to 20%. So just figure out who's actually done the modelling here, and you sort of realise why you might need a feel-good factor on the side just to actually dilute some of the pain that's inside this budget.
Yeah, but I just wonder whether it's going to make people think, well, look, if you've got $15 million to help give netballers a little bit of extra money to play sport, which is a fun thing to do, but it's not making the country richer, where's all this money coming from? How it might make people wonder about his economic management. Tell me how this man keeps finding new ways to spend money when his big projects, his big infrastructure projects are bleeding money, when his signature suburban rail loop project went up in an estimated cost from $50 billion to, get this, $125 billion. And the state's got a bigger debt than 3 other states, including New South Wales, combined. I mean, that is an appalling record.
And the interest bill continues to rise because interest rates are going to continue to rise in Australia. So therefore, the share of the state economy that's going to be taken by those interest payments will undoubtedly also increase. The interesting part that I'll be watching is when Standard & Poor's and Moody's come out in the next couple of days and they give their analysis of this. Remember that it was when COVID hit that Victoria and New South Wales lost their coveted AAA credit ratings, and they are now AA rated. What I'll be fascinated to watch, with the amount of debt that's racked up, with the amount of unfunded or questionably funded spending that has taken place inside this budget, the question to me is really what happens to that credit rating, because that really in many ways will bell the cat in terms of the strategy that the Victorian government has got to not only address the debt. But here's the funny thing about this. They're saying, don't worry about this because in the out years we'll get back to surplus. Well, you've racked up 60% more debt than what you've got now before you get back to a surplus. So you've got to maintain some pretty healthy assumptions even to get to that surplus in the first place. And remember, that doesn't go anywhere near to paying down the massive debt that will have been racked up in the meantime.
Well, I find it hard to believe that they say, well, in 4 years' time, we're going to post a surplus. I think it's really skinny. It's less than $1 billion, so 700 million or something, really skinny. We're going to do that on the very same day that they said their figures from just 6 months ago were wrong to the tune of nearly $2 billion. They were $2 billion deep, Victoria's $2 billion deeper in the hole. I don't believe a word that this government says about economic management. I just think the whole thing is really shonky. And please explain to me why Victoria, which is the second biggest state, like I come back to it again, has a bigger debt than even New South Wales, plus Queensland, plus Tasmania altogether. How could that be?
Oh, well, that is a very significant answer that people of Victoria have got to try and find out for themselves about. But one other small point about this is you go back to Jim Chalmers' budget delivered last week. Now, one thing about Jim Chalmers is that there was no additional spending in the immediate few years, right? No big spending areas. They had some areas where they promised before the election, but the fact of the matter was they had that spending pretty much covered. The big spending in the Chalmers budget was in the out years. He was frightened to spend because he was worried about inflation and the impact of inflation. But here you go in Victoria, you've given out money to just about every family there to say, sorry, we know the energy bills are going up, so here's a little bit of money here. We know that there's public service wage rises coming. We know that there's more people being hired inside Victoria. Where those people are coming from, God only knows. But the reality is all of that is going to add to inflation in Victoria and to Australia. And that adds to the pressure for the Reserve Bank to keep interest rates higher. If the interest rates are higher for longer, the property prices don't go up. You don't get the transactions in property. You don't get, therefore, for a state government's point of view, the stamp duty or the land tax that you need to help this budget reach its lofty assumptions. So that's the reason why this budget almost goes round in circles.
Ross, you're ignoring the main thing. Daniel Andrews will get re-elected. He doesn't care. There you go. There you go. Ross Greenwood, thank you so much indeed for your time.
No problems at all.